Oh, yes, welcome aboard. This is the Passed Ball Show, brought to you by Pielli.com. It's the 6th of December, Wednesday of 2017. We're going to talk a little baseball today, and we're going to be joined in a little bit by Sanfilippo. He's coming back to the program, my former co-host on Game Over on 1450 AM WCTC. I do want to get into some other things going on in the world, which we'll try to do towards the end of the program. If you don't know by now, the Passed Ball Show is about baseball, sports, and unifying America. And those are three things that I am extremely passionate about. And if you hear my message later on, I think you'll see how my message is not political. It's all about maybe forgetting about politics and start to think about the human element of how we could get ourselves together and unify as a people. I did hear something today that I wanted to kind of talk about, and you think about a player that ended up leaving the game as a very disgraced individual. And we're talking about Rafael Palmeiro, and he had the opportunity to play in the major leagues for 20 years. One of 4 players, if I'm not mistaken, to have 3,000 hits, 500 home runs, and one of, certainly, based off his numbers, one of the best players to ever play the game. I mean, you're talking about a guy with 569 home runs and 3,020 hits. Drove in a ton of runs, was a beast from the Orioles, mostly from 95 to 2003. Of course, he played with the Texas Rangers for the last 5 seasons there. Guy who came up in the major leagues with the Chicago Cubs in the late part of the 1980s. And was still kind of a, maybe more of a natural hitter, a batting average type of hitter, as opposed to being somebody that had the ability to hit for as much power as he would later end up hitting. The issue with him, of course, is the way that he left the game. He was disgraced on his way out. Probably the only star, and certainly really the first star, to actually get suspended for the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And he does that in 2005, which ends up leading to his release and subsequent retirement. Now, we could talk about Rafael Palmeiro, what he said to Congress. I had never used steroids, period. Or you could talk about his statement that he said later on. I didn't knowingly take steroids. Okay. Now you talk from a psychological value of trying to figure out what's going on in the guy's head. He really thinks that there's some way that the general public and Major League Baseball, and maybe perhaps someday the Veterans Committee for Baseball's Hall of Fame, will start to look at him in a different light if he happens to come back on the field and play Major League Baseball at the age of 53. First of all, if he went out there and did anything halfway decent on the field at age 53, in other words, proved that he could help a team, that he could hit for some average, hit some home runs, what's to think that anybody would think that he'd be doing it legitimately? The natural depreciation of a body at age 53 should be nowhere near playing in a professional game, let alone on a major league level. So you're talking about a guy that has been out of the game for 12 years, ended up finishing his career when he was 41. He's 53 right now. And even with the use of the PEDs, he was starting to digress a little bit. He played in 154 games in 2004, hit .258 with 23 home runs, 88 runs batted in, an OPS of 796, which, by the way, was his lowest OPS number since 1989. And 1989 was his first year with the Texas Rangers, which, by the way, .275, 8 home runs, 64 runs batted in 156 games, which shows the type of player that he was, the player he eventually grew into, which was a perennial 40 home run, 110, 120 run bat inning guy. And you see in the second half of his career, all of a sudden, he has immaculate plate discipline. He's drawing more walks. He's striking out at a lesser rate. He ends up finishing his career with less strikeouts than walks. And he was never a big strikeout guy, but he would usually have a couple more strikeouts than walks. So you're looking at his career, the way it stands out. Obviously, the way that he fell from grace at the end by, basically putting his own foot in his mouth when he was suspended for the use of performance-enhancing drugs after he basically lied to Congress. Now, why Congress didn't charge him with perjury is beyond me. I mean, I don't know how they couldn't prove that he was being dishonest when he goes out there and fails a drug test. He could give you any story in the book. And let's be serious. Players that get caught using performance-enhancing drugs, their dishonesty is thrown right to the forefront right away. So any story that they try to configure or throw together to make you think that, it's otherwise, like they're all of a sudden being honest, as if the positive test was not a sign enough of dishonesty, you're just as silly as they are if you believe those stories. And I'm not out here to say that Rafael Palmeiro is a bad man, but I'm just not understanding his logic here. He's going to say it's really a lose-lose situation because he goes out there and he hits 300 with some power. How are you going to trust what he's doing at age 53? He was supposed to be done when he was 40. So if he goes out there and falls on his face and embarrasses himself, it was just basically a sign that he shouldn't have been back anyway. And I'm not saying he doesn't belong in baseball. I'm not saying this guy shouldn't be a coach. If he wants to, let him stay in the game. You're looking at a guy that, numbers-wise, once again, and I talked about Manny Ramirez last week where we were talking about the Hall of Fame ballot. Rafael Palmeiro's numbers are great. Unfortunately, we live in a day and age and the era of the judgment over PED users, and he falls right in to place with those that were using performance-enhancing drugs. And if I'm ever going to consider Rafael Palmeiro for the Baseball Hall of Fame, I want to see Bonds and Clemens and Manny Ramirez get in first. And after that, Sosa and McGuire. And to me, we can't talk about honesty. We can't talk about integrity when we're talking about a guy that lied to Congress and then used performance-enhancing drugs. Like I said, I'm not a big, huge anti-steroids guy. I think at some point the baseball writers and the Hall of Fame itself will come around. But this doesn't make any sense. You know what this reminds me of? Rafael Palmeiro attempted to come back in Major League Baseball is reminding me of Stan Ross from Mr. 3000. A guy who ends up announcing his retirement after he gets his 3,000th hit, ends up having his number retired by the Milwaukee Brewers. Obviously, we're talking about the movie here. And not a single player outside of his best friend and a middle relief pitcher that played 15 years ago with him are the only players that show up for his number retirement ceremony. Something pretty similar we'd see in Rafael Palmeiro. You're talking about a disgraced player, disgraced by his own right, all of a sudden coming back when he's not necessarily wanted. And what is Rafael Palmeiro going to do if he can't beat out that 23, 24-year-old or that 30-year-old designated hitter that's entering the prime of his career? I mean, sure, I think there'll be a team out there that'll take it in as a publicity stunt. But come on. This is Stan Ross. That's exactly what Rafael Palmeiro is. And I understand Mr. 3000 has a nice ending at the end, and Stan Ross endures himself to his teammates. Think about what he did to Miguel Tejada. Think about what he did to his fellow teammates with the Baltimore Orioles. Just couldn't wait to get the pressure off of him. He would have thrown his mother under the bus if it got him a chance to save some public face. But we didn't realize at that time, as he was continuing to embarrass himself, he made himself look worse. He made his team look bad. And it's hard to believe that the Baltimore Orioles would even consider bringing him back. And on top of this all, he ends up saying at age 53, he's in good enough shape that he doesn't need any extra training. He doesn't need a couple games in the minors. After 12 years off and not playing Major League Baseball, in addition to being disgraced the way he ended up going out, become the first star player to get busted for the use of performance-enhancing drugs. And after that, try to blame your teammate for it all. And then 12 years later, decide, have the audacity to say that you want to play again. Not only that, but you think you belong at the Major League level. Passed Ball Show here. I'm happy to be joined right now by a radio show host on 1450 AM WCTC, my co-host on Game Over, and a man who I've done years of radio with, and that's Mike Sanfilippo. Mike, what's going on?
Hey, not too much, John. What's going on with you these days? I'm hearing you rant about something. Sounds like something you're pretty passionate about. What's it all about?
Well, I'll start out by getting your take on this. I don't know if you got the story, but Rafael Palmeiro announced today that he wants to try a comeback at age 53. He feels that if he comes back and is effective at the Major League level right now, which he feels like he's in the shape to play, that it'll do something to keep his tarnished image and maybe let him into baseball's Hall of Fame.
His image is too tarnished, John. I mean, not only with the whatever stuff he was taking, but the fact that, if you remember, and I think everybody remembers, whoever watched, paid attention to it, the way that he acted in Congress, in front of Congress at that hearing, pointing his finger at everybody, and basically calling everybody a liar. I just think that even more than the PED use, John, is probably going to prevent him from ever coming back. I mean, what's he going to take now to be able to come back at 53? What's he going to take, Metamucil?
I don't know. He might be taking Stanlosol or one of those things they used to give to those thoroughbred horses.
Well, do you agree with me that his attitude is probably going to be more as far as what people remember about him more than the actual PED use? I mean, he's one guy that's still probably today defiant that he ever uses stuff. I don't think he's ever going to get in, John. He could come back at 53 years old and maybe have a 15 home run year for somebody or a 20. I don't know. I mean, he could be in the greatest shape of his life as far as he's concerned, John. But he may be in great shape for 53 years old. You and I both know that there's one thing that's always undefeated: time. You can't go back in time.
And you know what? Even with the use of the PEDs that he had, apparently, he was suspended right before his career ended. So obviously he was using some sort of performance-enhancing drug towards the end of his career. His numbers were already declining. So with the extra help, it wasn't helping him anymore. So, the disgraced way he ends up leaving the field, which the Orioles end up releasing him because of the public outcry and just the embarrassment in the clubhouse after he tried to blame Miguel Tejada for his failed drug test.
Right.
And, after that, he was a free agent and nobody in baseball wanted to go near him.
Well, let me ask you this. How long was the suspension for? Do
I think it might have been 10 days. This was like right at the beginning of baseball implementing its first drug policy. And
All right. So
I think it was in like the second year, or the end of the first year that Major League Baseball was implementing a drug policy.
So it's not like he would have to serve out. Even if he did come back and somebody signed him, he would have to serve out, let's say, a half a year suspension before. All right, so it's like that day. So that doesn't mean anything. But as far as I'm concerned, nobody's going to touch him now. There's just no reason to. Teams bring players in to try to win, and this would be so negative on both fronts. Ability to have a player who's going to give you production to win, and public relations disaster. None of these teams are going to touch him. So I don't even. When a player like that comes up and says something like that, you look at it, laugh, and then brush it aside. All right. How about what's your take on Aaron Boone?
Actually, I was going to ask you the same thing. I talked about it the other day. The issue with Aaron Boone is what he represents as opposed to what he brings to the table. I know a lot of questions have been taken going back and forth talking about, all right, this is a guy that was a broadcaster. He doesn't have any coaching or manager experience, and he's going right out there on the field. All right, I think that's a separate issue. But the thing that concerns me the most is the change of the modern-day baseball manager to essentially be a guidance counselor or a therapist. That's number one goal is to make sure they have the best, the players on the team feel like they're loved, they're coddled, they're so well taken care of, and their manager loves them. I don't like the change in this kind of approach because if things go the other way, if a team starts losing, if players start acting up, you're automatically off the bat announcing that you're not really going to have a disciplinarian aspect of your manager. So at that point, you're going to have the inmates running the asylum, Mike.
Hey, you think Aaron Boone falls into that category?
I don't think it's for a fault of his own. I think the manager that the New York Yankees were looking for, pretty similar to the manager that the New York Mets were looking for, was somebody that is going to embrace the players, love the players, and go out of their way to make it about the players and camaraderie and happiness and loving. And this is what the game's turning to, unfortunately. So when it comes time for a manager to enact some sort of discipline, they're not going to have the legs to stand on because essentially they're allowing the players to walk all over them.
So you think showing tough love these days is almost a completely forgotten thing, especially considering these huge guaranteed contracts that players have. And managers come and go. Yeah, managers get let go even though they're owed money. John Farrell was owed money in Boston, I still believe. I don't think it was that last year's contract. You might know that better than me. But you see it all the time. Managers will let go. You can't cut a player if he's making, because the players are making $10, $12, $15, $20 million a year. You can't cut a player making that kind of money for the very reason that you can't just replace him with another great player, because another great player is not out there that would match that guy. Plus, that money now counts against your payroll, leading up to the threshold penalty. So, I mean, we have come to that part, John. We have, unfortunately, where managers can't be, I'm not going to say a disciplinarian, but they can't be the one to show tough love to a player who they feel is showing.
But you'd agree with me, Mike, that there has to be some balance at some point.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not asking the guy to be the next Billy Martin or Lou Piniella. I understand from a certain extent that the game has changed a little bit, but I think there has to be some balance at some point. The players have to understand, yes, that they have a manager that's there to make sure that he is their guidance counselor or their therapist, but at the same time, that if you're going to act up, if you're going to be late for practice, if you're going to loaf it on the field, if you are going to do anything that requires any sort of disciplinary action, yes, the manager should be the first person that gets in your face.
Well, it's going to be tough for Aaron Boone or anybody else who gets the manager's job today to find that balance where you have to show respect. It's basically don't know this, me a little bit more in the past, but you right now, is that players today, and you mentioned the word before, John, coddled. And these guys have been coddled since the time they were 14 or 15 years old. When, you know, when you're a star player in a high school team, and you're the big man on campus. Same thing if you go to college or whatever, or if you get drafted in the minor leagues. And these players are coddled and then when they get that big contract, now they become almost, you know, insufferable in a way. Now, I'm not saying all the players are like that, but in order to be able to find that balance, that word you used a minute ago, balance, of being able to treat the guy with respect, but come down on him when you think you need to come down on him, that's an almost impossible line to toe these days because of the kind of money the players get and the fact that the managers are always the first to go when something doesn't work out. So, is Boone going to be able to do that and still manage to decipher all the information that Cashman is going to put on him as far as analytics and everything else that comes involved with today's way baseball plays? You know, I think it's something that, you know, maybe Brian Cashman was wowed by this guy in the interview process.
No, and that's why I want to set something straight. You know, this isn't me a knock on Aaron Boone, the managerial candidate. I have more of an issue with almost his hands kind of being tied behind his back a little bit. I don't know if you're going to get to see the best of Aaron Boone. And I'll use Mickey Callaway as an example. If these guys were approached in these particular interviews, which unless we have an insider that was there that's going to be able to tell them the exact dialogue that went on, let's say between Aaron Boone and Brian Cashman and the Yankees front office and whoever was there, whether it was Hal Steinbrenner or Lon Tross or Randy Levine. But, you know, the problem is that these people, you know, perhaps were put in a spot where they almost felt the need to have to go the route of saying, yes, I'm going to be, you know, almost extra easy on a player. But you know what I'm saying it in a way, hey, listen, I'm going to make sure that I have the pulse of the players. I'm going to make sure that the players respect me and love me and know that I'm going to be there for them to be able to help them with their problems. If there's an issue, I'm going to make sure that they feel good about it. Maybe this was something that gets brought up in the interviews where these candidates who have different type of skills all of a sudden forget about all that because they want to get the job and they're going to answer the questions the way they know the questions want to be answered.
Yeah, that's true. You tell the general manager and whoever else is interviewing, give them the answer that you think they want to hear.
And think about it, Mike. You're interviewing for a job. You want to get the job, right? So if the person that's interviewing you is leading you with certain questions and kind of giving you an idea of what it is that they want to hear, well, even if you disagree with it, you're going to tell them what they want to hear.
Yeah, of course you are. And this is why Mickey Callaway, his press conference was everything what you just mentioned, you know, about almost being a guidance counselor to the players at times more than being their manager. If I was in that press room that day, and I was waiting for the question to come up, and I'm really surprised that this way didn't come up. When somebody went to Mickey Callaway and said, "Oh, everything you say is all this and that is all great and whatever," but are you a manager that's going to show those two words I just mentioned a while ago, tough love? Are you going to show tough love to a certain player that we all know kind of chase it once in a while, that, you know, doesn't run out, you know, and actually pulled his hamstring a couple of times because he didn't run hard out of the box, but pulled his hamstring trying to spread the single to a double when he's, you know, when he should have been walking into second base with a double. Are you going to be able to do that to that certain player? You and I both know who that player is, because he's making an awful lot of money. Are you going to be able to go to that player, hey, I didn't see you hustling on this play, I didn't see you hustling that play, you're sitting down for a game or two. Are you going to be able to do that, and yet
No, I think I might have, but the problem is that's the introductory press conference. Everything's supposed to be roses. That's the day you bring out the carving board, and everybody's all happy and lovey-dovey. But I would think a time like this, let's say baseball winter meetings, which a couple days I'll be down in Florida, I would love to have the opportunity to ask a question like that. Or maybe build up with a couple of questions that kind of lead into it that don't, put him at a point where he feels uncomfortable. But I would like to know, all right, let's say you have a situation where a player is not giving you his best. Okay, you could have that talk with him outside, but is there going to be some sort of progressive discipline in place to make sure that, players, when they commit the same offenses or are going against team policy, have some sort of accountability?
Well, I did say, no, you're going to be able to sit that player down, and even though it might incur his wrath temporarily, and yet be able to explain it to the New York media that night. Why didn't he play? Well, this is why he didn't play. I didn't think he was putting it all out. He's making $25 million a year, and a lot of times, I should say almost all the times, managers don't like to use that. The amount of money the guy is making. They want, because they're worried about the player being offended. Well, if a guy is making that kind of money, I have all the respect in the world for a manager to come to say in public, look, we're expecting $25 million a year worth of effort, not just production, but effort out of him. And that is nothing that disappoints me unless he's under instructions by the team brass not to bring it up. But that is something that should be brought up, and I'm really surprised that hasn't been brought up. When you shove that player's salary in his face through the public and then embarrass the player, if that player's embarrassed about it, that should spur him to go play hard from there on, instead of making it even worse. So, it's a tenuous situation. And I understand these managers have a lot of problems dealing with the high salary players, dealing with the media, and in a lot of cases, like Girardi has in the last few years, dealing with fading stars. So I'm going to give Aaron Boone a chance.
No, and I agree with you, Mike. I think both of these managers deserve an opportunity, and I think especially when you're coming off of a situation where they're being introduced or reintroduced to the New York media. It's all about them getting a job, them kind of saying the right things. So they're not going to be baited with any sort of question. Obviously, we know what you would do if you were the manager, Mike. You would roll with an iron fist. And these players would understand that there are repercussions for their actions, and you're going to make sure you remind them how much they're getting paid. But, unfortunately, it's not set up for that to be successful in baseball. I can't think of the last time that I heard anybody in a front office or a manager or a coach make any reference to how much a player makes. I understand they are well compensated, and because they're well compensated, they should have responsibility to play a certain way, give the impression that they're giving their all every single day. But now the game, it's just unfortunately changed right before our eyes. And it's frustrating for me. Obviously, it's frustrating for you too, Mike, to think about, all right, what are the players going to do? At what point do the players take control of the locker room? And, to quote Bob McNair, partially, the inmates will be running the asylum. And once again, I have to throw a disclaimer out here every time I say it. When I say inmates running the asylum, I'm talking about an employee undermining their boss. It's a figure of speech. But it happens all over the world in all types of businesses. It's starting to happen a lot more in sports right now.
Yeah, but John, in full disclosure, Bob McNair said, and it kind of pissed off a lot of people when he said, when the inmates are running to prison.
No, I know, and that was the big difference. And I spoke about that a couple of weeks ago.
But I understand where you're coming from. That's why it's incumbent upon general managers saying to bring in the kind of clubhouse players. CC Sabathia, I still think he's going back to the Yankees come hell or high water. Is that kind of a player? Walker was that kind of a player with the mess that cares. but to work with the pitching staff. His experience in developing pitchers, he did a terrific job in Cleveland, and I think he was brought in, and we know he's got a pitching coach too, but he was brought in, to me, to get these pitchers to where the Mets, as long as they're healthy, to get them to where they should be. To look at their videos, to look at everything and say, oh, okay, look, there's something here that can be corrected. I don't know if Matt Harvey's going to ever get back up to 98, 99 miles an hour again, but maybe he will help him learn to pitch a little more instead of throwing. Same thing with Syndergaard, where he can make Syndergaard take him to another level. So, John, do you agree with me that his ability to work with pitchers probably got him more consideration for the job than what the Mets think he could be as far as actual X's and O's in the dugout?
Well, Mike, I'll give you a quick answer here. It's a little yes and a little no. I agree and I disagree. I agree because obviously you have a pitching type of mind that's going to give that extra input like you just mentioned. He's going to be able to look through tapes. He's going to be able to look at mechanics. And I think he should be able to get as much, if not more, out of the pitchers. I disagree because the biggest problem that has held these Mets pitchers back over the last 2 years has been health. You're talking about Matt Harvey, who had thoracic outlet syndrome and his injury this year. Noah Syndergaard, his injury this year. Jacob deGrom was hurt last year. Steven Matz is always hurt. Seth Lugo has the partial tear in his UCL that he managed to pitch through this year. Juris Familia was hurt. So, I would like to have seen all these pitchers the last couple of years and see what they would be at if they were healthy. To me, what I get out of it is the injuries held these pitchers back more than anything. So if Mickey Callaway is getting a healthy group of pitchers that weren't healthy last year, hey, he sure as hell better do well with these guys if they're all healthy.
Well, maybe his way, I'm going to intertwine the two. Maybe his way of showing these pitchers how they can improve in a way that will leave them a little less susceptible to injury. Noah Syndergaard tore his lat muscle. Maybe Noah Syndergaard needs to be brought down a peg a little bit as far as forgetting about trying to throw the ball through the wall every single pitch. Ron Darling has touched on this a bunch of times.
Yeah, he did.
He says max effort in the third and fourth innings, which hurt you in the seventh and eighth and ninth innings, to pace himself. He used to say all the time. He said, I never cranked it up when I needed a big strikeout in the third inning. I only cranked it up when I needed a big strikeout in the eighth inning. So maybe he's less susceptible to injury if he learns to back up just a little bit and become more of a pitcher. And the same thing goes with Harvey, and the same thing goes with Matz. Maybe Matz needs to change his pitch selection, go a little bit less for what Callaway thinks has been the most cause for all of his elbow problems, one after the other, and he notices something that will make him a better pitcher and less susceptible to injury. So I think, John, those two things are kind of intertwined a little bit.
All right, I agree, and I don't think that's bad. Once again, we're joined by Mike Sanfilippo, my co-host on Game Over on WCT's 1450 AM in Somerset, New Jersey.
Which we will be back during the winter meetings. Tell everybody during the winter meetings.
Yeah, winter meetings. Well, we'll find out exactly when. As soon as we get a date set, you'll let me know, and I'll let the audience know.
Yeah.
And we'll certainly get into some things as I'll be live down in Florida. Hopefully, hopefully with some news.
And a lot of stuff has already been done. Although there's going to be rumors, and I know there's going to be rumors, and then we can talk then, and that'll be, it'll be really great if we can do that. I'm pretty sure we can. You'll be down there, right in the thick of all the stuff. I know you're going to talk to agents. I know you're going to talk to, managers, maybe GMs, maybe the players. You've been down there. It's kind of a free for all, and I'm pretty sure you're going to be able to supply some really dynamite information on that 2-hour show.
Well, that's my goal, and that's part of the reason that I head down there. Mike, I want to touch on a couple different topics going on in baseball.
Right.
Stanton to the Giants. looks like the most logical thing at this moment. The Giants have agreed on a package that they're willing to send to the Marlins, and it is quite generous, including a couple top prospects. They're willing to take on a lot of money in regards to the contract. Gun to your head, Stanton going to the Giants or not?
It looks like that since the Giants know that they are his preferred the destination. Why you wouldn't want him to go to the Cardinals and be on I know he's a West Coast guy, but hey, look, you can spend the other 6 months out of the year that you're not playing on the West Coast. You want to go out there, but you're right. I think the Giants could have really held up the Marlins, knowing that they are his preferred destination. But give me the names of the players, John. That you're thinking about, and how much money did you hear that the Giants are willing to pick up? I mean, I'm hearing numbers like 250 out of the 295.
Yeah, I think it was starting at 250, and the Giants were willing to pick up more money if it meant that they had a better chance of getting a deal. Tyler Beede is a top pitching prospect that they have, and they're willing to give him up. Christian Arroyo, who we've seen in the major leagues this past season, was one of their top infield prospects. They're willing to include him as well in the deal. So it looks like the Giants are willing to offer, I'm not going to say a superior package, because I know the Cardinals really want to get this deal done. It may have an advantage in wanting to do it over the Giants. But, I mean, my thing is, and you made a good point, listen, it works for the Cardinals. They have the bigger need, I think.
Oh, yeah.
They certainly have bigger desire. I think will be willing to do a little bit more than the Giants if they have to, if it's a deal breaker. But in the end, it's going to come down to whether Stanton's willing to approve a trade at all. He could still say no. He could still say, Mike, that he's waiting out for the Dodgers because that's the real place that he wants to go if he has a choice.
Well, I don't know if the Dodgers are going to be part of the mix now, because what does he do? How much more can you improve a team that had the best record in baseball and went to the seventh inning of the World Series? I mean, the Dodgers are going to be just fine. If this was taking part next year, where they shed even more salary, Puig won't be there anymore, I would say yeah. But the Dodgers, I don't know if Andrew Friedman's going to go down that.
No, and the realistic part of it, Mike, is that the Dodgers aren't engaged in negotiations now. The Dodgers are not interested right now. But the problem is this is the preferential place of where Giancarlo Stanton wants to go. So what I'm getting at is, how much does Stanton want to go to the Dodgers? Does he want to go to the Dodgers to a point where that's the only team he would accept a deal to? Because if that's the case, he may very well be the only good player playing in South Florida next season.
I know that he doesn't want to be there. He would like to be there if the team was competitive, but I think he realizes now that, especially since they're also trying to move out D. Gordon, that really that Derek Jeter is going to tear that team down and start from square one. So he's going to get his money either way. So that doesn't matter. It's just, where do you want to be? pence for a while. Well, now they're going to have it if they pull this deal off.
And remember too, the Giants finished with the second worst record in all of Major League Baseball. And if it wasn't for a Pablo Sandoval walk-off home run in the last game of the season, they would have finished with the worst record in all of Major League Baseball.
So, the number one pick, yeah. Anyway, I think the Giants are going to be his destination, only because I still think, if given the choice, he's going to choose the Giants, but there's no trade clause. He's going to choose the Giants over the Cardinals because that's where he wants to go. And if the Giants are offering up the prospects that you believe they're offering up, I'm just looking at it right now on ESPN.com, and the Giants general manager is not offering up any names. In other words, he said that they have a deal. The parameters are there. Bob Evans, who I think he works directly under Brian Sabian, right?
Yeah, he is the Giants general manager right now. Brian Sabian is the team president.
Brian Sabian is like he's the president of baseball operations, right?
Yeah.
All right. Much like how Theo Epstein is in Chicago. So
Yep.
Bobby Evans is saying that they have a deal, the parameters of a deal in place, which probably means that they come up with some kind of agreement on who the prospects are going to be. Now,
well, the guy that's been on this trade the most is Craig Mish from SiriusXM. He seems to have the best sense of what's going on. He reports that the Giants are willing to trade top pitching prospect Tyler Beede, infielder Christian Arroyo, outfielder Heliot Ramos, and first baseman outfield prospect Chris Shaw. Now, if they're willing to take on, it says it looks to be between $250 and $295 million. So I think that number is somewhat negotiable. I believe it's been agreed upon between the two teams. The Marlins have a chance to get 4 very good young players. I'm not going to say they're all top prospects. I think Arroyo ranks the highest in regards to MLB.com's top 100.
yeah.
But Beede and Ramos are probably borderline top 100 prospects. And Chris Shaw is a good player that has the ability to play both first base and the outfield. So if you're the Marlins, you're getting 4 young pieces to build around, plus the payroll relief. So I think in the end, it seems like a deal that makes sense. The only thing standing in the way is the approval from Giancarlo Stanton.
Now, if the Giants are offering up those 4 players, like you said, that's pretty good for the Marlins. Then I really think that the Marlins need to then take a bigger bite out of that contract, because if the Giants are doing exactly what you're saying they're doing, then they need to have some of that salary relief from the Marlins. So maybe, and I'm reading here, it might even be as much as $90 million out of the $295, which probably means that yes, the Giants are offering up that many prospects, so the Marlins should be biting a little bit more of that contract. So we'll see how that works out. But
I think if you look at it like this too, I think Derek Jeter, the Marlins ownership group, and everybody are all thinking about this, and they're like, how much should we be paying Giancarlo Stanton not to play for us, that it is more worth it for him to just be here and take the money?
They're all getting those 4 prospects, so figure like, but see, I understand what you're saying, but you can't look at it that way. As far as I'm concerned, you can't look at it like how much are we paying them to not be here. You have to look at it how much is now off our books that we don't have to worry about. And especially if you move Dee Gordon, who makes good money, that's even more money off your books. See, the Marlins got to get their financial situation straightened out. I mean, they lost a ton of money last year. Now, they don't draw big time in that stadium with or without Stanton. The only thing that they have to worry about really as far as the backlash is concerned is that, all right, the people are going to say, well, what are we going to do now? But you weren't going to the stadium anyway. So if people can't complain because they weren't drawing, and if you go back to when they were playing in the football stadium, Joe Robbie Stadium, or whatever name that they happen to have at that time, they weren't drawing then either, unless except for the 2 years, they went to the World Series. So, it's really a situation that I think goes far beyond the baseball aspect, and that more accessible, in a better area where people can come watch the games, or people have the kind of money to pay the tickets to watch the games. That may sound a little biased a little bit, but when they built that stadium on the grounds where the old Orange Bowl used to be, I think they made a big mistake, and they're going to be paying for it for a long time, John. John, they can't draw people there, even with or without Stanton.
And they still haven't worked on a new TV contract. You look at all these revenues that these teams are getting with these new TV contracts. They seem to have not gotten involved with that. I don't know if it's something that they're looking to do in the future, but certainly if they worked out a new TV deal, got some money coming in that way, that could help stabilize them a little bit as well.
Well, and again, it's a vicious cycle, but how do you negotiate a very good local TV contract or even a local radio contract to your 100-loss team?
The sad thing about it, the Marlins finished in second place this year. Now we're projecting them to do so poorly next year because we expect the team to be completely stripped of its stars. I don't just expect Stanton and Gordon to get traded. I expect to see either Ozuna or Yelich moved, Brad Ziegler, pretty much anybody that they could possibly move and get some value for. I got a feeling it's going to be another fire sale this offseason.
For another couple of years?
Yeah, but I think they're looking to restock the farm system. I think this is, Derek Jeter's plan, or the Marlins ownership plan since taking over this team, is to drop the payroll probably around $75 million. So you're talking about $40, $50 million off of where it is right now. And the only way to do that is to start moving top earners, but also move players that are going to be more desirable to other teams to allow you to, let's say, include a Brad Ziegler or a Martin Prado or a Wei-Yin Chen, some players that are making a considerable more amount of money than the Marlins feel like paying off their books.
How much did they get for a Chen who's paid a lot of money but has disappointed so far?
Well, that's what I say. Like you include a player like Ozuna, who has several years of team controllability, is a star in his own right, and you say, hey, one of the things to this deal, take this Wei-Yin Chen contract off of us. And you know what? You might be able to make a trade that way.
Boy, I tell you what, you're really stripping it down. I'm not going to say it's going to happen. But I wonder if Derek Jeter goes so far that Rob Manfred actually steps in and says, hey, you got to at least try to put somewhere of a competitive team on the field. What do you think about that?
I think that's a good point. I think it could possibly happen, but if Jeter and the ownership group are able to tell him, hey, we're looking at a rebuild, look at what the Houston Astros did. They were a great story in baseball, how they rebuilt for a series of years, ended up winning the World Series. Look at the series of young players that I've brought in all these deals, then I think he could keep Manfred from invoking the best for the integrity of the game clause.
Yeah, I just look, Marcell Ozuna becomes a free agent after next year, and was second eligible of arbitration. He's a free agent after 2020. I would hold on to him, even though he's got stuff for us as an agent. You have you got 3 more years with him. So I would hold on to Ozuna because, it's not like he's making a ton of money. I'm trying to figure out exactly how much he's making, but he's not making a ton of money. Him and Christian Yelich, I think I might hold on to them but I understand you're going to get $25 million almost a year off of your books just by moving Stanton, and it's a good start. And if you move out Chen, and if you move out Gordon, I think you got to stop right there. You got to put something resembling a product on the field, John.
Listen, I don't think you're wrong in anything that you're saying. That being said, I mean, nothing that the Marlins would do as an organization, and I don't care who the owner is, whether it's Wayne Huizenga, whether it's John Henry, whether it's Jeffrey Lurie, whether it's Derek Jeter, they've all had one thing in common. that they haven't hesitated to strip this team down to completely nothing. So nothing that this Miami Marlins ownership team, no matter what the ownership group looks like, where it's coming from, or who owns the team, nothing would surprise me in regards to the depths that they would go to strip this club down to nothing. Now, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if they got rid of everybody.
Well, I just looked. Chandler's making $16 million a year. Wow.
Yeah, he opted into he had an opt out after this year, and he would have been he would have been he would have lost his job from the Players Association. They would have had to turn in his card if he declined it, his opt out in his contract. I mean, if he didn't opt into his next couple of years, which I think he's getting $16 million for the next 2 or 3 years. So.
Yeah, and even Yelich, I'm looking at it right now. Yelich is making, it looks like about he signed it in 2000. His contract he's got up until 2021. He's making about $7.5 million a year. So even Christian Yelich has got a modest contract, but not one that it will be prohibited from being moved out. Well, I'd love to see him in a Mets uniform playing center field, but that's not going to happen. Not get traded in the division. Well, although who knows? But the Mets are not. I don't think the Mets will pick up that. Anyway, that's a different story.
And Mike, let me get your take on Ohtani. I know it was a surprise the other day when you heard that the Yankees were eliminated. Now it comes down to the 7 teams. You got the 4 teams in California. You got the Mariners. You got the Rangers and the Cubs. Go.
Right now, the rumors that over the last 3 hours have switched from Seattle to San Diego. Now, he wants to be on the West Coast. We understand that. He's looking at areas, cities where there's a very low, even though the rumor was that he stated he did not want to be on a team that had another Japanese player. I don't know why he would say that if he did say that, but he seems to be really favoring cities that have a very large Japanese population. Seattle, of course, is one of them. San Francisco is, although I don't think he's going to go there. There's no rumors that he's going to go there. San Diego and L.A. You know where I'd like to see him go to? I want to see him go to the Angels. Because, forget about the Dodgers. If he would go to the Angels, who just re-upped with Justin Upton, that would be a big boost to that team that has a few holes and really needs another player to help out Trout on that team. He would give them the DH role, because he wants to play both ways. And, he would be a nice addition to that pitching staff. I would like to see him go to a team that really needs him. Seattle would be a great addition. They really need help in their starting staff. Keith Phillips is starting to be on the downside of his career. I really think it's going to be either Seattle or the Angels. I'm not sure his flirting with San Diego really is all that much right now. Your take on that?
Well, there was a couple points that were made yesterday about why it would be a good idea for him to go to San Diego. Hideo Nomo's there. He's working for the Padres front office. Apparently, A.J. Preller has put together a really good presentation to try to lure him to San Diego. The Nippon Ham Fighters had practiced with the San Diego Padres the last couple of years in Peoria, Arizona. So there's a little bit of a connection there. Randy Smith, who is a former Padres general manager, it works for the Ham Fighters now. So there's a series of things that would put, maybe a little more understanding of the possibility that he could go to San Diego. But just from a logical standpoint, I don't see it. Here's one question I want to ask you, because I talked about this yesterday. The contract that he signs, how much is he looking, and I'm talking about Ohtani here, to cash in when he turns 25? In other words, is there any possibility that this contract that he signs with this next team, whoever it is, will only be for a 2-year deal so he could become a free agent when he's 25 and make that $200 million?
Boy, that's a great question. I don't know, because I don't know how the collective bargaining agreement is in accordance with the international rules that govern this. I don't know. I mean, if that was the case, then the don't know.
And another thing too, I wanted to ask is that you talk about him making the decision. Hey, I'm going to go to this team. Is there any negotiation that's done beforehand? Like, in other words, if he's talking to the Padres and he wants to go to the Padres and they're saying, hey, we're only going to offer you 3 years, but he doesn't really want to go to, hypothetically, the Rangers, but the Rangers are willing to give him an 8-year contract. So does he have the opportunity from a negotiation standpoint to look at one team to the other based off of what they're offering? Or is this process set up to where these teams are competing with each other over his services to make a decision, and once the decision's made, it's up to them to come in agreement for a contract?
So, in other words, can a team can kind of break the rules a little bit, although nobody will know about it, and through back channels or whatever, and say, hey, look, you come here and you play well, this is going to be waiting for you in a couple of years, and then actually offering, show him the contract that will be offered to him in 2 years. That's why I don't think he can just become a free agent in 2000 after 2 years. But I don't think that can happen. I think that can be circumvented so easily, John. You know that.
Yeah, I think it can be, and I just throw it out there because you know what, it's a possibility. It's worth thinking about.
Yeah, I know. It's something to think about. Can a team, say, hey, look, 2 years from now, we're going to give you this, which would make the big money teams like the Angels, Mariners, Dodgers, Yankees, Red Sox, Cubs, in the forefront to sign into a big deal in 2 years. I don't think that could happen, John, because I think that would have been borne out already.
And I think if it did, it would mean the end to the Japanese posting system as we know it. I mean, the backlash from it would be unbelievable. It would almost put a little bit of an embarrassment into the sport in the process. And I bet you the owners and the players would make sure that they collectively bargain this relatively soon. They probably wouldn't even wait for the next agreement to come up. They'd put something in to make sure something like that would never happen again.
Yeah, I know. I really think he's going to have to serve out so many years that's in the international rules that state safe. If you come in before 25 years old, you have to go. That's something I think you can research and probably find out. If you're an international player, unlike if you're a player coming through the American League, the American minor leagues, of all these teams, you still have to wait a full 6 years before you're a full-time free agent. So it may be less, if you're before 25 years old. But we'll see. But it's a great team to think about, John.
All right, Mike. Listen, I appreciate you coming on with me, buddy. We'll definitely talk next week. We'll be probably on WCTC doing some baseball winter meeting stuff as I'm down in the state of Florida.
All right. Thanks for having me on, John, and have a great evening.
All right, no problem, Mike. Good to talk to you. That was Mike Sanfilippo talking some baseball. We got into some stuff talking about the new New York managers, talking a little Stanton, talking a little Ohtani. We'll be back with you tomorrow right here on Periscope and Facebook Live, and available, of course, on replay at YouTube. Thanks for joining me. God bless you. And as always, I'll see you on the other side.
Rock over London, rock over Chicago, Barcelona, the San Francisco tree.